Lilia Parkman, maiden name Motovilov, born in 1937, immigrated to America, California in 1996 at age 59. Lilia originally grew up in a shtetl called Polonnaia in Ukraine. It is a city on the Khomora River of western Ukraine. It is located coordinates 50 degrees 7 north, 27 degrees 31 east. The town is in the district of Novograd, Volhynia, Russia. Nearby shtetls include Ponink, Lyubar, Kamenny Brod, Chudnov, and several others. Polonnaia was fortified during the 17th century. 12,000 Jews found their refuge from neighboring towns during the Cossacks' uprising in the 1650s. Jews began living in the area of Polonnaia in the 15th century. They were running away from religious and nationwide persecution that they had to endure in Western Europe. There were several hundreds of thousands of Jews in the Ukraine before the Russians conquered it. Religion was highly emphasized for the population of Jews in Polonnaia. Jewish life was very rich in Polonnaia. There were many rabbinical teachers and preachers of high prominence. Lev Mikhailovich Sibiryakov lived from 1870 to 1938. He was born to a poor Jewish family in Polonnaia under the name of Leib Spivak. He studied music in Odessa and then in Italy. He became a Christian in order to be able to sing at Russian opera theaters. Mariinsky Opera Theater hired him, so he worked with Fyodor Shalyapin and Leonid Sobinov, singing with them for many years. Peretz Markish is considered the most famous Jewish resident from Polonnaia, Ukraine. He was born in Polonnaia on November 25, 1895, and became a very renowned Yiddish poet. He wrote almost 40 Yiddish poems, many of which were then translated to Russian. One of his most renowned poems was Heritage, which speaks about the life of Jewish workers and their struggle together with the Russian workers for happiness and freedom during the Revolutionary War of 1905. He died in 1952 during the Stalin-Beria repression. In her later years, Lilia moved to Leningrad. In the 1980s, Lilia was living in an apartment in Leningrad with her husband, David Ruvimovich Parkman, and their children, Maria Parkman and Mikhail Parkman. Lilia had an uncle named Haskil. He fled Russia to live in Palestine around the 1920s with the Zionist movement during the British Mandate and after the Russian Revolution to build kibbutzim. Around the 1980s, Haskil came back to visit the family for the first time after being gone for 60 years out of the country. According to my mother, Maria Johnson, there were diplomatic relations between Russia and Israel during the time that Haskil came to visit. Haskil was able to get back into Russia through a Palestinian Communist Party tour. This was the first time that Maria's grandfather was able to see his brother since the 1920s, and Haskil was able to meet the rest of the family. Haskil had mailed Lilia Parkman's parents packages from Israel throughout the years. However, Maria has no idea how they got there because there would be no way for him to send packages by mail. Maria was never allowed to tell her friends where she got her clothing, which was from Haskil through the mail. They couldn't tell anyone that Haskil was related to them, for their family could be persecuted and her father would lose his job. My mother, Maria, states that Haskil never came to her house. Instead, the family went to her grandma's and grandpa's apartment. They had to put a pillow over the phone so as to make sure that the government wasn't listening to their conversations, as they thought that the phones were bugged. My mother's father never went to meet Haskil because he was afraid to lose his job if anyone ever found out. This is quite contrary to my grandmother's story. Lilia found a big picture of a cute man one time and asked her grandma who he was. It was explained to Lilia that it is Lilia's uncle, for she had never heard of him. Lilia said that her grandma and grandpa didn't know anything about Haskil's life. They couldn't correspond with each other because it was illegal. There was a Palestinian delegation where only Arabs could come to Russia, so Haskil said he was an Arab and became a part of the delegation. With this delegation, he came to Russia in the early 80s or late 70s. Haskil expressed that he wanted to see Lilia's family. Nobody was sure how to react to this and couldn't understand how he found them. The Arab delegation put him in a hotel, and so the family and Lilia's father went to go meet him. It was hard to organize this, and they had to cover the phone on the wall so that the government couldn't hear. A big paranoia during that time was that all walls had ears in hotels. So Lilia met Huskiel and brought him into their home. Huskiel was able to meet the family, and their family drove him to the cemetery of Huskiel's mother and father. According to my grandmother, the family lived in communal apartments which housed 6 families. They had 1 kitchen, 2 toilets, and 1 room for the family. Hannah, Baruch, Abraham, Maria Motovilov, Mikhail, Maria Parkman, and Lilia all living together. When Huskiel saw that Lilia's daughter, Maria Parkman, lived like this, he made a point that Maria shouldn't live like that and that she must go to Israel. Huskiel invited the family to visit him. Thus, Lilia's daughter and she went to Israel. They were the first to leave Russia from my immediate family. My mother states that Huskiel invited the whole family to visit him in Israel. Lilia took up on this offer and traveled to Israel with her daughter in 1990, about 10 years after she was invited. Lilia went back to Russia, and Maria stayed in Israel and met her fiancé, Eric Johnson, on a kibbutz in Israel. Maria traveled to America with her fiancé and married him in America, prompting Lilia and the family to move to America around 1996. Lilia's husband died of cancer before he had the chance to move to America. However, my uncle, aunt, great-grandmother, great-grandfather, and cousins were able to move to America. When my family lived in Russia, they didn't celebrate any Jewish holidays or go to synagogue because during the communist rule, any religion was forbidden. The only connection to Judaism that they had was that my mother's grandparents would buy matzah for Passover. When Maria's nephews moved to the country, their parents made sure that they went to Hebrew Sunday school and that they had their bar and bat mitzvahs. Now, my cousins are thriving at both Harvard and USC, having opportunities that would have been unavailable for them in Russia.